Okay, we're on 114A. 1 second. Okay, we're going to start again from the two dots. That's about halfway down the page, a couple of lines below the Gemara at Hare Elu Shalom Bnei Shabaylam. Okay, so let's brief review. The Mishnah a guy basically exchanged horses or donkeys with the tax collector or with the robber. Now I'm just going to make a note here. What's the difference between a tax collector and a listim? Listim are bandits. What's the difference? The difference here is Ganev versus Gazlan. A tax collector, again, we're talking about the illegitimate type of tax collector. That's what we spoke about on Shabbos, the whole Gemara with Shmuel, Din, and Kusatina. We had two answers, either Merchas She'en Lekitzva or Merchas Ayman Be'elov, meaning either a tax collector who's collecting more than he's authorized, or a self-appointed tax collector, basically, he's selling the Brooklyn Bridge, as they say in English. Okay, we're just beginning a review of yesterday, and we haven't started yet. Okay. Now, so the tax collector, he's a public thief. Everybody knows he's not allowed to steal. We said you were here yesterday, right? You were here yesterday. We spoke about two types of tax collectors.
Yes.
He spoke about a tax collector that's unauthorized, that he's authorized for a certain amount and he collects more than he's authorized, or a tax collector who's self-appointed.
There's no fixed limit if he doesn't have a fixed limit, everyone's in trouble in his mandate, his charter.
Indeed. Okay. Now, so the robber here is a public thief. He's a Gazlan. The bandit, on the other hand, he's a thief of the night. So he's a Gazlan and Ganev, and we'll make a difference soon. Okay, regardless, you can't exchange your donkey with his donkey. Why not? Because you presume the tax collector's donkey is a stolen donkey. 1 second, hold on. Nevertheless, if it was changed, I should say you're not allowed to. If it was changed, it just doesn't talk about whether you're allowed to or not, but if it was changed, you get to keep it because the original owner has given up hope on getting it back. We saw the Brisa disagrees, but that was the Mishnah. Okay, similarly, if there was a flood or there was a sort of an assault on the city, and everybody effectively gave up hope of anything of value in the city surviving. So then the law is that if somebody comes in with a rescue boat and rescue stuff, he gets to keep it. Because the owners have given up hope they expect their things to be destroyed in the floods. It's as if he's saving it from something as if he's saving something that would be otherwise destroyed.
Okay, but the item in question is a seriously significant and inestimable value. Then couldn't it be said that the owner may never truly lose hope of recovering it?
Maybe. Obviously, is you familiar with the story of the SS Central America?
It was a steamer full of gold or silver, I think.
Steamer full of gold and silver. It went down, I believe, in 1865 or 1866. California gold rush money, basically. Yeah. Extreme. The amount of wealth in that boat was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah. It was found by a private company, I think in the 90s, early 2000s, maybe something like that. The problem is the insurance companies that paid out the claim in 1865, they were still around. So they said it's their boat. Federal government said it's an abandoned treasure in federal waters. It's our boat. And the state that lost it, which was California, said it's our boat, it's our gold. And the state that which it was going to said it's our gold because it was coming to us. Of course, the private company says, well, we found it.
I guess we're all on the same boat on that one.
Yeah, it took years to settle that one in court. Years.
How they sell it? Was the determination?
There was a percentage. Everyone got a certain percentage. Insurance
that's fair, but look, that's a big point. The company that issued the policy was still in existence.
Yeah. Now, however, under Jewish law, the company that found it would be able to keep it. Period. It's Zuta Shalyam. It's abandoned. Nobody has any hope of getting it back. Insurance companies never made a good faith effort to hire submarines to go find it.
They didn't have them back then.
Well, they had it in 2000. They could have decided to take it. They gave up. Once you give up, it's too late. It's done. If this went to a theoretical Jewish court, not that it ever would, the finder would be the keeper.
Okay, well, get the Ayush thing going, whatever, but suppose it was an object of fair enough value that someone who came upon it after the flood or what have you can figure
Yeah,
out,
so if
this is valuable enough, someone must own it, it's got to sit
Yeah,
on
so-
it of some kind, don't I have a responsibility to find the guy?
right. So within reason, if if it didn't involve hiring a ship with a submersible,
I'm not talking about that, I'm talking.
right.
about
If within, I'm saying within
thing.
reason, if it was much more reasonable than that type of possibility, then you would be right. Then the owner did not give up, in which case the finder does not get to keep it. And we'll discuss more of this as we go along. We'll discuss more about the rescuing and who gets to take the booty of the rescue. Okay. Okay. Harelo shalom ibnei shabaylam. Okay. So basically, the money is kept by. Okay. So basically, you exchange your donkey. You can keep the donkey because the owner has given up hope of getting it back from the meiches, from the tax collector. So Amar Rashi says it depends what type of tax collector. We began this Gemara yesterday. Good morning.
Please.
About halfway down the page on 114a, and we're at the 2 dots. First one line is Shaloi B'nei Shabaylam. Next words. Shaloi is the first word. Amar Rashi. Lo shano listam oivig gechavim. This has to be non-Jewish bandits. Avalistim Yisrael, but if they were Jewish bandits, then loy, the halacha does not follow this. Why? He says, tomorrow I'm going to bring them to court. So in other words, when the bandits are non-Jewish thieves, then he gives up much faster than if they were Jewish thieves. Now, if you're thinking something's wrong there, yeah, it was yesterday we saw the Gemara. The Gemara had a question on this. The Gemara says, Maskav Rav Yosef Adra, to the contrary, the opposite is true. Akum the Dina Begaisi, the non-Jews that have a different court system, loy miyayish. It's much easier to collect money in a non-Jewish court. This remains the case today. However, Yisrael Akiyun the Amri Meimar miyayish. By the Jews, you have to prove that you're the original owner. But the non-Jews, once a guy is a thief, basically anybody can lay a claim on anything about him. But by the Jews, you have to prove that you're the original owner. It's much harder to prove it. So if anything, you should give up faster from the Jewish legal system than from the non-Jewish legal system. So if anything, if we had to choose who's going to give up faster, if the thief was a Jew, you'd give up faster because you'd have a harder time getting it back. Whereas if the thief was a non-Jew, you can go to non-Jewish court, it would be easier for you to get it back. Okay, so Gemara says, you're right. You're right. We'll switch to Gemara. Somebody who saves something from non-Jews or robbers. Specifically, if so, in this case, there's a flood, or there's a conquest, or there's bandits that are attacking a city. That's the critical word. What does that mean? If the owners give up, what does that mean? That means that you have to know the owner gave up, right? Eric, you with us?
I'm with you.
In other words, if, like you mentioned before, there's a reasonable possibility of him recovering his item, he wouldn't give up. In that case, he wouldn't be able to keep it. So the Gemara says, but without knowing the owner has given up, you can't keep the item. So the Gemara says, this is only true with non-Jews, because they have their own court system. It's easy to collect money. So therefore, people don't give up as fast. However, Avalistim Yisrael, but if the bandits were Jewish bandits, since it's much more difficult to collect from them in a Jewish court, therefore miyayish, the original owner, gives up much faster. In other words, even without knowing he gave up, you can presume he's given up already, because he knows he's going to have an uphill battle to collect his money.
Well,
So Jewish bandits attack a neighborhood, they loot everything,
yeah.
and somebody goes in and just takes it all away from them without going through the court process.
Mhm.
In that case, the guy who takes it away can keep it. Why? Because the Jews have basically given up from getting back their items.
We're
Because
talking non-Jewish third party here. Is that what we're talking
no,
about?
or Jewish third party.
Or-
Everyone could be Jewish in the story. Everyone could be Jewish. The thing here is that most of the people are not going to have witnesses that they owned everything they claim to own. If I ask you to prove everything that you have in your house is yours, would you be able to prove it? Of course not. At least I for sure wouldn't be able to. You'd be looking through old pictures and witnesses. It's just very, very difficult.
Please.
But that's basically the idea. Because it's more difficult to collect, people will give up from their items much faster. Obviously, if it's things that they do have witnesses for, then maybe they wouldn't give up. But things that they don't have witnesses for, they give up right away, even without knowing they've given up. You can keep it. The rescuer from the thieves can keep it. Tanan Hassam. Okay, we learned in the Brisa. Irish bias. Okay, so this is the law of the skins, right? You have a guy who is a tanner, right? He takes skins from dead animals and he uses them to make functional items. Now, so it's very important. What's the first thing? The first thing is you prepare the skin. So that in English, I think they call this thing leather now, right? Let's see if it's from a cow. So you take a cow skin and now you turn a cow hide and now you turn it into leather. Once it's leather, though, you can make it into maybe a leather shoe, right? You can make it into a leather jacket. You can make it into a leather bag. Put it into your car if you want. Put it on the seats. All sorts of things you can do with it. Or what can you do with it? You can use it as a rough equivalent of the modern day box spring, right?
Of what?
Of the modern day box spring.
Oh.
So in other words, you use it to cover your beds. Today we have box springs. Obviously, in times the Gemara didn't have box springs. They had a rope contraption, and you would layer over the rope contraption. You'd lay over a leather. It has some small amount of elasticity to it, so it sort of made things more comfortable, for a mattress. Okay, so now you have a guy who has a hide. So if he's a regular person who's tanning his own hide, so the hide is finished. It's now leather, and he thinks, you know what, I'm just going to use it for my bed. At that point, he has a thought, right? Just a thought. It's a machshava. What happens is the item is now susceptible to become tummy. Raw material is not susceptible for tumah. A raw hide that's not usable for anything is not susceptible for tumah.
True, but this is tan.
Over here, now it's leather. Leather could be a raw material in the context. Exactly. Exactly. It wouldn't make a difference. In other words, leather, like you said it very nicely. Leather is something that could be a finished item if you're using it as a bedspread, or it could be considered a raw material if you're using it to make shoes or put it into your car or something like that. So now, if you're a balabayas, you're a regular person, when you have a thought to use it as a bedspread, now it becomes susceptible for tumah. Now it's a finished product.
If you also may argue that since by virtue of the fact that the tanning process itself was completed, there was automatically a finished item then?
No. It have to be finished is defined by usable. And the usableness is defined by, well, what are you going to use it for? So if you're a regular person and you have the thought to use it as a bedspread, now it's a finished item. The thought alone. If you're a professional, on the other hand, and you sell whatever you do, you might think to yourself that this is a beautiful bedspread. But ultimately speaking, it's not up to you, it's up to the buyer. And therefore, that thought that you're going to use it as a bedspread is not significant until you actually go ahead and use it. Because anything in a professional's domain, in his possession and in his domain, meaning like skins in this case of a tanner, is always up for sale, unless he puts it onto his bed. So the fact that he had a thought to put it on his bed is not sufficient to make it a finished good. It's still considered a raw material. And then the buyer, okay. So now it's not hotsam. Irish balabayas. You have the skins of the balabayas, the hides. Mashavim tamosan. The thought to use it as a bedspread makes a tummy. V'shal avdan, the professional tanner. Ein mashavim tamosan. The thought does not make a tummy. Shal gazlan, of a thief. Ein mashavim tamosan. Gazlan is, remember, a thief of the day. He's much more brazen. I think in English, this would be like a mugger, a guy who mugs, right? He's clearly, he's not scared of anybody. He's just a rough and tumble guy. And, he does what he needs to do to take what he takes. So if it's a gazlan, the gazlan does not acquire it. Why? Because the thought process here at this point in the Gemara is the gazlan, you know who it is, you know who stole it from you. You're not afraid, you'll go take him to court. However, v'shal ganev, but if it's a thief of the night, machshavim tamosan, then you give up quickly. So therefore, the thief owns it. Once he owns it, his thought to use it as his personal bedspread makes a tummy. Reb Shimon says, chilaf hadvarim. It's the opposite. Shal gazlan, the thief at the daytime, if he's so brazen to steal by day, then you're also too scared of him to take him to court. So you're so scared of him, you give up ownership immediately, and he owns it now. So his thought can make a tummy, turn it into a finished goods. However, Shalganev, the guy steals at night, he's scared. Now, if he's scared, you're not scared to take him to court. Now, the owner doesn't give up hope, he'll take him to court. Okay. So Amar Ula says, Machlokes b'stam. This machlokes is in a general situation. Aval b'yadua, but if we know the owner has given up because we heard him verbalize, his yush, his giving up of the stolen item, so then Kani, the thief acquires it, and if he has a thought, that thought turns it into a finished goods. Rabba says, even if we know the even if we know that the original owner has given up hope of getting the item back, there's still a debate. So Amalei Abayas says, "L'Rabba loy tiflik ula." Rabba doesn't disagree with Ula here. Why? The Mishnah specifically says like Ula, right? The Mishnah says you have the bandits and the owner hasn't given up, right? Meaning, but if the owner has given up, then I'm sorry. The Mishnah says that if you save something from bandits because the owner has given up, you get to keep it. Meaning, if the owner hasn't given up, you don't get to keep it. Right? Clearly, this supports the opinion of Ula. Let's explain. 1 second. Because the original owner hasn't given up. But if the original owner has given up, then it belongs to the original owner. I'm sorry. It belongs to the guy who saves it from the bandits. Right? The bandit is taking the items. The owner gives up. Then the guy who takes it away from the bandit gets to keep it because the owner has given up. Okay. So Amarlei. So Rabba says, "Anan lefish ein yush l'bailam masninan law." Okay. So Rabba says, no. The Mishnah is not talking about because the owner did or didn't give up. According to Rabba, the Mishnah is because he can't give up. And presumably that the circumstances are such that he would not be giving up on this item. 1 second. Hold on. No. Sorry. The question that Ula was asking was from the Mishnah of these skins, not from our Mishnah. We'll get to our Mishnah in a moment. Our Mishnah is also difficult. The question that Rava was that Abai was asking Rabba was from the story of the skins, where if the owner gives up, then the thief. Give me a second here. Okay. In other words, Reb Shimon explains his reasoning. Reb Shimon says, the reason why I say that the thief of the night, his thoughts don't make the item tamei, is because he hasn't given up. Clearly, if we know he has given up, then Reb Shimon would agree that the thought of the thief is sufficient to turn it into a finished goods because the thief acquires it by the owner giving up. So this clearly disagrees. This clearly disproves Rabba's opinion. Rabba is trying to say that even after we know the owner has given up, the item still remains. The item still remains in the domain of the. 1 second. Even if we know the owner has given up, the item still remains the domain of the owner, and the thief's thoughts do not turn it into finished goods. This is not correct, because the Brisa specifically mentions that the owner hasn't given up. If he would have given up, then the thief's thought would be significant. And Rabba says the thief's thought is never significant. Rabba says no matter whether or not the owner has given up, the thief cannot turn it into a finished good.
What's the significance of the nighttime?
So according to Rav Shimon, the thief of the night is scared, so he's easier to collect from.
Okay.
So the thief of the night, because the owner hasn't given up, because he's going to collect from him, that's why his thoughts aren't significant. He hasn't acquired, the thief hasn't acquired the item. But the implication is, if the owner would have given up, then he would acquire the item, and his thought would be significant, which contradicts Rabba's opinion, which says even if he did give up, the thief's thoughts are insignificant. So the Gemara says, okay, no, what we're talking about is she'ein yush l'bailam, meaning because giving up is not possible. In the case of a thief of the night, the owner does not anticipate giving up, and therefore he's not giving up, period. It's not that if we know he gave up. He isn't giving up because he knows he can collect it. Because the thief of the night is scared and he's much more comfortable taking him to court. As opposed to the mugger, according to Reb Shimon, the mugger you're much more scared of because he has the brazenness to mug in the middle of the day. Okay. Okay, one second. Okay, so now we go to our Mishnah. Tnan, we learned in our Mishnah. Notlu muchsin chamayri. The tax collectors took his donkey, gave him a new donkey. Right? We said you can keep the donkey. So the Gemara wants to know, Mani, who is the Mishnah like? Now remember, I told you before, we have two types of thieves in the Mishnah, a moichis and a listim. A tax collector and a bandit. What's the difference? A tax collector is a gazlan, right? He's a mugger. A bandit is a thief. He's a nighttime thief. So let's 1 second. So what's going on here? Both the Mishnah says both a nighttime thief and a daytime thief, they acquire their stolen items. Why? Because the owner has given up. Who's that like? It's not like the rabbis. It's not like Reb Shimon. According to the rabbis, if by a daytime thief you don't give up because you know who it is, and according to Reb Shimon, by a daytime thief you do give up because he's brazen. But by a nighttime thief you don't give up because he's not as brazen. You're not as scared to take him to court when you figure out who it is. We're together? So who's the Mishnah like? It's nobody. The Mishnah says that a daytime and a nighttime thief are exactly the same. Both scenarios, the owner has given up. Why is that? Which one is it? According to the rabbis, a daytime thief you don't give up. According to Shimon, a nighttime thief you don't give up. What's going on? So the Gemara says, Mani, Ira Baron Kasha Gazlan, Ira Shimon Kasha Ganev. Bishlem Ula, according to Ula that says, the Amr B'Yadua, Kani, Hachanam B'Yadua. According to Ula, it's very simple. We know the owner has given up. We know the owner has given up. Everybody agrees, both a Ganev and a Gazlan, you acquire it. However, according to Rabbah that says that even if we know you've given up, you still don't acquire it, then well, what's the Mishnah like? It's not like a rabbi, it's not like Reb Shimon. El Rabbi, we do nine machlokes, hamayne le Reb Shimon. The Gemara says very simple, but list mizuyin Reb Shimon. We're talking about armed robbers. Armed robbers, even though they're nighttime thieves, and they actually pay kafel for being a nighttime thief, but they have a certain brazenness. You know who they are, right? They come with guns, whatever, swords, pickaxes, nighttime. So these are armed nighttime thieves. But in other words, so they steal at night because they don't want people to see them, but they're armed because they want to make sure that the owner is not going to be able to stop them. So the owner knows who they are, but for most halachas we consider them nighttime thieves. Except that with regard to the owner giving up, he gives up faster by armed robbers, obviously, right? If a guy's willing to steal, guns, presumably you're not running to take money out of him in courts. Fair enough? Okay, so the Gemara says, it's the same as a daytime robber. So the Gemara says, you're right, Trey Gavin Goslin is two types of daytime thieves. Even though technically we said Listim Zin is really a nighttime thief, but he has some aspects of daytime thievery. So it's two similar scenarios. That's why we give that as an example. Toshma, let's see. A Ganev, a Gazlan, a Onas, Hekdesh, and Hekdesh, Trumos and Truma. You have a Ganev and a Gazlan, right? Daytime and nighttime thief. An Onas is a different type of thief. He's a thief, but he pays. So he decides what he wants, and he decides what the value is, and it gives you a token amount of money. It's sort of like a eminent domain type of government, bribery scheme or something. Corruption. Okay, so Hekdesh is Trumos and Truma. The sanctification is valid. If he takes of Truma, it's valid. The Meiser is valid. Clearly, he owns it. Mani, whose opinion is this like? Irabon and Kasha Gazlan, Irab Shimon Kasha Ganev. How could you equate Ganev and Gazlan? There's a debate here between the rabbis and Reb Shimon. Okay, so let's go again. According to Ula, Bishlem Ula, the Amar B'Yadua Kani, when we know the owner has given up, they both acquire it, so it's very good. We know here he gave up. That's why both the daytime and nighttime robbers acquired it. But according to Rabbi, it says even if we know the original owner has given up, still it would you cannot collect from the fact the owner has given up does not transfer the ownership to the thief. How can the thief turn it into truma if he doesn't own it? And this is neither the rabbis nor Reb Shimon, because we're equating here a daytime and nighttime thief. Sigmar says, you're right, Reb Shimon here, we're talking again about armed robbers, according to the opinion of Reb Shimon. That's the same thing as a daytime thief. Sigmar says, you're right, Trey Gavin Goslin, there's two types of daytime thieves. Another possibility is Hamas Nisan, Rebbe. This opinion is opinion of Rebbe. Tanya, what does Rebbe say? Rebbe Omer, Gazlan, Kaganev, a Ganev and a Gazlan has the same law. Now, obviously, the question, okay, and we'll just get to the conclusion immediately, and then we'll explain how we got to the conclusion. Typical Talmudic fashion. The Kaimel Gazlan or Shimon, meaning Rebbe says a Ganev, nighttime thief, is like the daytime thief of Reb Shimon, meaning both types of thieves, the owner can be presumed to have given up pretty quickly. And that's how all the Bryce, the Mishnah could all be the opinion of Rebbe, that you've given up fairly quickly. Okay, now let's try to analyze this statement. Right? So this conclusion I just told you, we'll go through it again now. Gufa we learned. Rebbe said, my opinion is, Ganav Gazlan, there's no difference between a daytime and a nighttime thief. Ibailus. The question in the Gemara, again, we already got to the conclusion. Now we're going to ask how we got to the conclusion. Okay? So we just said, Ibailu, Gazlan de Rabbanan Kamar, Velaikani, Adam Gazlan de Rabshimon Kamar. Well, which type? You said nighttime thief is like a daytime thief, meaning he's like a daytime thief for the rabbis that say, "Oh, we know who he is. We'll go collect it in court." Therefore, the owner does not give up. Or do we say like the daytime thief of Reb Shimon? He's so brazen, nobody's going to take him to court. The owner gives up very quickly. Which one is it? You got it? Or are they both? Do we mean to say they're both equivalent that the owner does not give up, or are they both equivalent that the owner does give up? Yeah. Now we've already reached the conclusion, right? What's the answer? The owner does give up in both scenarios, like Reb Shimon. But now we'll go through the process. So let's try to prove this. Not you took the tax collector took his donkey, right? So we have tax collectors and bandits, which effectively are daytime and nighttime thieves, right? That take somebody's. You were here yesterday? No. Okay, so just very quickly. The tax collector is considered a thief for two reasons. If he's a legitimate tax collector, he's not considered a thief. He's considered a thief in one of two scenarios. Either he's a self-appointed tax collector. It's like somebody selling the Brooklyn Bridge.
Gangster. Okay.
Yeah, the mafia charging security fees and whatever, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
What happened was the king used to authorize a certain amount of money. The tax collector is a private individual or service.
Mm-hmm.
The king would authorize a certain amount of taxes, and the service would buy the rights to collect those taxes for less than the total value.
Mm-hmm.
So the king would authorize $1 million, they would buy it for $800K. Mm-hmm. And then they would go collect the taxes. But this guy says, "Oh, once I have the authorization, I'm collecting $2 million."
Yeah.
Then he's a thief, obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the two types of tax collectors we're referring to here. Okay. This is what we saw yesterday. Okay. So Gemara says, Mani, whose opinion is this? Irabon and Kasha Gazlan, Irab Shimon Kasha Ganev. The equivalence of a daytime and nighttime thief, obviously a tax collector overcharging is considered a daytime thief. Everyone knows he's an idiot, right? He's taking the money publicly. No shame. So according to the rabbis, only a nighttime thief the owner gives up. According to Reb Shimon, only the daytime thief the owner gives up. So it can't be either opinion. So it must be, it's the opinion of Rebbe. Bishlema Rebbe, Kigazan Reb Shimon Kamar Vakani. So if Rebbe says, if Rebbe says a Ganev and a Gazlan are equal, and in both scenarios the owner gives up, so then our mission is like Rebbe. In both scenarios, even though the tax collector has stolen the donkey, you can trade your donkey for his donkey and still keep it. You don't have to give it back because it's a stolen item. That makes sense. But if you say that Rebbe says in both scenarios you don't give up, in this case, Rebbe says you never give up. The rabbis say you don't give up by Gazlan, and Reb Shimon says you don't give up by Ganev. The Mishnah says you give up both by Ganev and by Gazlan. So it's not like any opinion. So this must be a proof that Rebbe says that both Ganev and Gazlan are the same, and in both scenarios you do give up. You do give up hope from getting it back. So Gemara says, what are we talking about? Ballistim Zuyin, Reb Shimon, who we're talking about armed robbers like Reb Shimon and Gazlan. An armed robber is the same as a daytime thief. So Gemara says, Trey Gavni Gazlan, there's two types of daytime thieves. There's armed robbers and muggers. Tashma, next attempt. Haganav Agazav Anas Dation Hektish Trumas and Truma. Mitzvahs and Meiser. The previous Gemara we just saw. The Ganav is able to take off Truma, he's able to take off Hektish, etc. And his Meiser is valid also. Mani, whose opinion is this like? Irabon and Kasha Gazlan, Irab Shimon Kasha Ganev. According to the why are we equating a daytime and nighttime thief? According to the rabbis and according to Reb Shimon, they're different. Okay, if you'll say that Rebbe's like Reb Shimon, it says in both scenarios you give up, meaning the robber acquires it and therefore he's able to take off Truma. Irab Shimon, Ganev Gazlan, Irab Shimon Ka'amar Misham Hakikani. So then this could be like Rebbe, Rebbe says in both opinions, Ganav and Goslin both have the same sets of laws. Ganav and Goslin have the same sets of laws, and you give up on both. You give up in both scenarios. Mishum hachikani. So that's why you acquire it. But if you say a Ganav and a Goslin are the same, like the rabbi's opinion, meaning that you don't give up in both scenarios, Ganav and Goslin, you have not given up from the from getting back the stolen item. So then, how can the thieves declare truma? It doesn't belong to them. If Rebbe is going with the rabbi's opinion, like the daytime thief of the rabbis. So Gemara says same story. Same story. It's armed robbers according to the opinion of Reb Shimon. So they're both daytime thieves, and according to Reb Shimon, daytime thieves, they're so brazen, the owner gives up. It's the same thing as a daytime thief. So Gemara says you're right. Trey and Goslin, two types of daytime thieves. Okay, last one. Toshma, the Masni Rebbe Reb Shimon Bray. Rebbe said to Reb Shimon his son, Loy davar sheyesh b'ach rayis mamish, ela filu porav charish b'chamorim chamer akrav chayov lahachsim nekovid aviyam. Okay, so what happened here? The father stole something, but it's a prominent item, right? We said the example is it has the family coat of arms in it. So everybody knows that this item belongs to the original owner. The father dies. Now his kids have the item. Says Rebbe, it's disgraceful. Dead person. Everybody knows that he's a thief. You have to return the item. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? You have to return the item. Why? Because it's disgraceful to his father. Meaning, because it's disgraceful that people should know that a deceased person was a thief. So that's why you have to return it. But if not for that disgrace, they would be allowed to keep it. Why is that? It must be because Rebbe holds like Reb Shimon, like the Goslin of Reb Shimon, that both a Ganev and a Goslin, the owner gives up. So therefore, the thief does acquire the item, and because he acquires it, the item, therefore he's able to take off truma. He's able in the case of the tax collector or the bandits, if you exchange your donkey, you're able to keep it. And in the case of children inheriting their father's stolen items, technically they can keep it, unless it's a prominent item, in which case they're obligated to return it because of their father's honor. Together? Yeah. Okay. Get to the bees. The story of the bees. So what happened? Again, I'm not an apiary, so I can't tell you exactly how this stuff works, but I'm just explaining how the Gemara presumes it works. So basically what happens is the guy has a swarm of bees. I presume he wants the bees because it's for the same reason we want it today, because they pollinate the crops, right? The orchards. It's very important to have bees because without bees, your fruit, your stuff won't grow. Okay, at least certain types, orchards maybe, whatever it is, certain types of fruits won't grow without bees. So the guy has his whole swarm of bees, and they're running out of his field. So he goes to chase after them, right? Whoever finds them, okay. So he tramples through his friend's field. His friend has a tomato field. He tramples through the field. He ruins a bunch of tomatoes. So he's allowed to chase after the bees, and he has to pay for the tomatoes. Well, we'll have to explore this. Okay, my v'chen. 1 second. Hold on, that's the end of the Mishnah. Just make sure I have this 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Now, if his friend has given up on the swarm, so his friend was chasing it, the swarm is faster than him, so the swarm got away, and his friend says, "Oh wow, there's a swarm of bees on my property. Let me invite them in. I'll give them some honey, and they'll pollinate my fields." Mm-hmm. Okay, so if that happens, then that is also permissible as long as the original owner has given up on getting back a swarm of bees. You're allowed to do that. My v'chein, what does it mean? And this is similar. Now, this is important to understand. The rabbis said that if you have a swarm of bees, you actually own it, because technically speaking, it's hard to argue that you own a swarm of bees. It's very hard to, now, if you have them in those netted things, those netted cages, and give them the nectar to make honey, it's one thing. I think they do this like in the zoos or something. I don't think in real life it works that way. I think you have the box and they go out and they come back in. Now, in that case, what? You gotta do some stuff. Right, but in that case, you can't own it because it's not controlled by you. They can go wherever they want. They can travel wherever they want. Okay, but the same thing is true by birds. The rabbi said you own a bird. Now you don't really own a bird unless it's in your cage in your house. Why don't you own a bird? Because even if you give them nesting material and they nest and they lay eggs, obviously not talking about chickens here that can't fly. We're talking about birds that could fly. They can really go wherever they want. So it's a rabbinical opinion. the rabbis said that because you accommodate the swarm of bees, or you accommodate, you give nesting materials to the birds, you quote unquote own the birds. You don't really own them because you don't have any control over them, or over the bees for that matter. Okay, we're on Kuf Yudal on base, in the middle of the page. Okay, my v'chein. So I feel like the kinder rabbanon. Tzad amin high kiven rabbanon ba'amu dekani. I feel stomach now in me. Ayesh kamashmalan and nisayah shabbanim in iloi loi. Because it's only a rabbinical kinyan, maybe I would think that even if the owner doesn't give up, effectively he's given up. The rabbis here created this new idea that you own something that you don't really have full control over, right? It's not like an animal in a corral, because in the corral the animal can't escape. Over here the beast can go everywhere. So the rabbi said it's yours. Yeah, it's yours, but if it runs away, it's not yours anymore. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's an automatic yish. No, it's not an automatic yish. The owner specifically has to give up. Okay, Amr Rav Yochanan. Okay, just to sum up the next Gemara. So basically, somebody's chasing after the bees, and a woman or a child testify who the ownership of these bees are. We believe them. So this discussion here is what we call Mesiach Lefi Tumah. Mesiach Lefi Tumah is when somebody says a story, and in the story there's relevant details about a case before the courts. The key component of Mesiach Lefi Tumah is that he has no intention of saying testimony. He doesn't realize that there's any significance to his story. He's saying over a story. And we'll soon see examples of stories that were said over, and the stories have details that have halachic ramifications, and in some cases we'll accept the conclusions based on the fact that the guy wasn't trying to lie; he was just trying to tell a story. Okay, so the Gemara says, "Amar Yechim broken and menace isha v'kotim. Isha v'kotim they edus ninu. Could they testify? Amar Vida Amar Shmuel Achim Ma'askin and Shahayu Bailam Mirad Finachrem. What happened was a swarm of bees were flying through a field, and somebody's chasing after them. The isha v'kotim asinchim lefitumam. And either the woman or the child, they were discussing the fact that this guy is chasing, they were gossiping that this guy's chasing after his bees. Now, they weren't in court. They had this wasn't a formal process. They were just gossiping about the guy running after his bees. So we rely on that to presume that the guy who's chasing after bees actually owns the bees. They say that the swarm came from this guy's property. So Amar Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi says this type of storytelling is only valid for the testimony of a woman whose husband has passed away. Right? This goes back to Yevamis. If you remember in Yevamis, we tried to figure out how to confirm a woman's deceased husband has passed. And in that context, we allow Mesiach L'Fituma, storytelling, to be part of a legitimate court proceeding, to determine whether or not her husband actually died or not. Just a practical, quick example: when a non-Jew is relied upon for this type of testimony. So, there have been stories where Trade Center's no notable example where someone passed away. There was no evidence of the body, couldn't find the body, but they were able to have a discussion with the non-Jews who interacted with this person right before he died. They didn't tell them it's a formal court proceeding. They said, "Tell me the story," and the guy would tell his whole story. And they would ask a lot of details about the story, like, was there anybody else in the elevator with you? Did you see anybody else around? How did you know them? They wouldn't even mention any significance about the fact that they were Jewish. And through that storytelling, you can accept the type of testimony in courts. Okay. 1 second. Okay. So the Gemara says, what about the fact that, so Rav Ashi is saying you only accept in the Mesiach Lefi the storytelling testimony in the context of a woman remarrying after her husband died. But what about our Gemara? We have the story of the bees. So the Gemara says, it's only a rabbinical kinyan. It's not biblical. There's no biblical significance. The only biblical significance we give to Mesiach Lefi to the storytelling type of testimony is to testimony of a woman allowing her to remarry. So the Gemara says, so you have a story here. What's the story? A guy is remembering, when I was a kid, when I was a child, my father used to carry me on his shoulders. He took me out of the school. He undressed me, and he put me in the mikvah to eat truma in the evening. Rav Chanina Messiah, but Rav Chanina says there was another detail to the story, that my friends weren't so, I guess they were jealous he was playing hooky or something. So my friends were upset about this. They would sort of separate themselves from me. They would call me the kain that ate challah. So I clearly hear there's a lot more details here than saying I'm a kain. It's the whole story here. Clearly, the story wasn't just to say he was a kohen. The story is remembering when he was a kid. He said over the story, somebody testified in court that this was a story the guy said. So Rabbi said the guy must be a kohen. 1 second. A kohen is biblical. And Rebbe is relying on the storytelling testimony, to make him into a kohen. So Gemara says, you're right, but Truma D'Rabbanan, this was only for rabbinical Truma. So Gemara says, are you still telling me that biblically there's never a place for this storytelling testimony unless it's to help a woman remarry? But we have another story. Some say it was He was said over a story, that came in front of Rabbi Shua Levi, and some say Rebbe. Some say the story happened in front of Rebbe. What was the story? There was a child. Okay, the catch here was his mother was married to a kohen. If the wife of a kohen has an affair that is prohibited, even under duress, where she's not guilty for anything, the kohen is not allowed to marry her. So what was the story? So this would be true. So if a Yisraelis woman has a relationship with a non-Jew, she can no longer marry a kohen. And if his mother was married to a kohen, they would have to get divorced. So what was the story? The kid was saying over a story. He was we were on a ship. It was captured by pirates, and they put us into slavery. We were locked in these. We were slaves. When I went to collect water, the only thing I was thinking about was to make sure they wouldn't violate my mother. When I had to gather wood to build a fire, the only thing I was thinking about was to make sure my mother wasn't violated. Clearly, the kid was ensuring his mother wasn't violated, and he's testifying to the fact that he was successful. His mother wasn't violated. So Rebbe said his mother can marry a kohen. Okay, so that is a biblical prohibition. So Gemara says you're right, but the laws of captives themselves, treating captives as suspected, as having suspicion that they had an affair with their non-Jewish captives, is itself rabbinical, and therefore we can rely on the storytelling testimony of a kid to allow the woman to remarry. Okay, let's continue. Now we said that you can chase into the guy's field to go collect the bees, and you have to pay for all the tomatoes you stepped on. But let's say the swarm settles on the guy's tree. So the guy's a great idea. I'll cut the branch, I'll carry it back to my property, and I'll have the swarm back, and I'll pay him for the branch. Gemara says no.
It only works.
Doesn't work. Can't do that. But according to one opinion, according to I believe it's Shimon, you are permitted. You're allowed to cut down the branch and collect it. Why are you allowed to do this? Tanya Rishol ben Omer, Tanai Bezdin who? Okay, let's just a little background. Is when we spoke about this previously in Bava Kamma, we spoke about it in other Masechtas, and Kedushin came up as well, that when Yeshua gave the Jewish people the land, he made certain decrees. For example, he allowed everybody to walk through empty fields. Normally it's trespassing. Yeshua said, no, convenience of the Jewish people, if the field is nothing in the field, you're allowed to walk through it. So he says this is another thing that Yeshua made a condition out of. So according to the opinion that says you're allowed to chop down the branch, this was a condition that Yeshua made. If somebody swarm settles in somebody else's branch, we allow him to cut down the branch and bring back the swarm on the branch back to his own property. And everybody has this privilege. It's equal. And he collects the value of the branch from the guy's swarm of bees. Which is okay. What? It's a communal agreement because of the communal productivity. Obviously, bees are always going to run around. It's better that everybody be able to reclaim their bees than nobody be able to reclaim their bees.
I see. Everyone's basically communal waiving of one.
Correct. Okay. Exactly. It's absolutely the way to frame it. It's a communal waiving of one's rights. Okay. Just like the trespassing. Everybody waives their rights to trespassing for a certain period of time when nothing is in the field. The field hasn't even been plowed yet. Okay. Another example is a Tanai Bezdin. She has shofech. So honey is more expensive than wine. Take that as a fact. And therefore, if a guy has a barrel of honey that broke and another guy's carrying a barrel of wine, the law is we tell the guy with the honey is allowed to tell the guy carrying the wine, empty your barrel and I'll pay you for your wine to save my honey into your barrel. And again, everybody's waiving their rights to their right to keep their wine, to be able for the greater productivity, because ultimately it's more important that precious honey be saved than cheap wine. Similarly, similar story. Two people are carrying. There are two donkeys, and I guess one of them breaks down. Whatever, he's too tired. One donkey's carrying wood; it's very cheap. Another one's carrying flax, which is very expensive. So the guy carrying the wood, the guy carrying the flax, his donkey broke. His donkey dies. Whatever. He can tell the guy carrying the wood, "Leave your wood here. I'll pay you for it. Carry my flax." This was a condition Yeshua made before he gave the Jewish people their property. Before he cut up the land of Israel to everybody, they agreed to a certain set of certain rights that were waived under certain conditions.
So you're saying the first party can compel the second party to agree to this deal so the more expensive stuff can be saved?
Correct. The expensive party can force the cheaper party to accept financial remuneration in place of saving his more expensive stuff.
Private version of eminent domain.
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah. Okay, have a great day.